What's going on, y'all? I figured I would put up something a little bit different and talk about how the A7S3 might just be a must-buy camera for me. The number of features that have been brought in with this camera are ridiculous. The number of checkbox, like dream camera features that people put up in the rumors that I thought, that is just getting way too picky and way too specific and way too just hopeful for things that don't even really exist yet, and yet most of those things are here. And to be honest, the few things that we didn't get are things that I'm actually pretty glad that we didn't. Like 8K video recording, it's not something that we need. It's not something I see a need for a long time. We aren't even necessarily at the point where 4K is even standard yet. And I think we should at least get to that point before we're sitting here expecting 8K readouts, something that's what, 4 times the resolution on prosumer cameras, or even something that's potentially going to be a prosumer cine camera replacement. Now, there's a few things that I'm incredibly excited to see that don't necessarily make it a must-buy. The full-size HDMI out is incredible. Mine's actually kind of suffering from a little bit of finickiness if I kind of jiggle it a little bit, since I run a full HDMI cable across the floor here to it to record into OBS most times. Huge win right there. Other staple features like the low noise performance is obviously a huge win, and honestly make it something I might even consider picking up to use as a backup camera in weddings for any sort of like low light situations that I know don't need to be blown up to a 20x30 print or cropped too much. And even the real deep features like 16-bit RAW that we don't even have recorders that are capable of capturing right now are definitely incredible. But the biggest feature for me is actually in regards to codecs, and it's not actually the HEVC based codec that allows for up to half the size of comparable files of definitely incredibly high quality, because that's actually not helpful. It's almost borderline pointless, because one thing that I've found lately since I jumped from recording on my A7S3 to recording through OBS and a small plugin, I can actually switch over to recording in ProRes. And the immediate caveat is that the files are ridiculous. They're astronomical. You know, they are multiple gigs per minute. But the crazy thing is that switching from Interframe to Intraframe allows for editing at such an incredibly higher level of speed and quality and just ease of use that it kind of breaks the brain a little bit to think that, you know, jumping from a 2 gig file to a 20 gig file would allow my computer to run super smooth. The fact is that with HEVC compression, as incredible as it is, as awesome as it is, I love it for pulling in movies totally legally. It keeps my hard drives very happy. When it comes to editing it, on the off chance that Premiere Pro even behaves well with it in the first place, it's just chunky. My desktop here has not only an overclocked i7-9700K, it also has an overclocked RTX 2070. It's got 32 gigs of RAM, and I never run anything off of anything slower than an SSD. And regardless of all that, I still struggle with 4K footage at even half resolution preview, and that just is hard to really wrap my head around, especially considering I get comparable performance or sometimes better depending on the codec on my Dell XPS 15 from 2 years ago. So it's very clear that the video format, the codec itself, is the problem, especially when it just occasionally refuses to play nice at all. And so the idea that now I can skip a recorder, I can skip having to run into OBS, I can run straight into the SD card or CF Express if I was getting really crazy, but let's be honest, it's for YouTube. I don't need it. Means that now I can skip the idea of transcoding, I can skip the idea of running proxy files, I can pull this footage straight from the camera, plunk it in, and immediately get to editing. And at the end of the day, the space difference, the size difference is 100% there, but if I have to transcode it or build proxies, A, I'm already spending way more time, but B, I'm also just using up that space anyway. So the idea that we have something that supports a quote unquote lightweight codec is absolutely incredible as far as prospects go. The idea that I have something that I can run and gun on the field and then drop that footage in when I get home sounds amazing. And that's putting my convenience ahead of even just the quality gains from Intraframe encoding as opposed to Interframe encoding. And just a quick recap, Interframe encoding is the use of temporal compression to take adjacent frames and use their data to find redundancies and compress the amount of data overall to create smaller footage files. And what this comes with is technically a lower quality, but more specifically comes with compression artifacts. And worse still is the idea that this compression, when played back by your media player, by your video editor, your NLE, it takes the fact that it needs to decompress constantly this data as opposed to just pulling it in. Not to mention, if you slice it, then it has to rebuild that interframe and kind of reprocess the second you cut, rebuild all that, and go through all this work just because you sliced it. And Intraframe encoding keeps every frame as its own separate image per se, much in the same way that you would consider a burst lapse of JPEGs. Each frame is technically compressed, but they are in no way influenced by the previous or following frames. Anyway, again, aside from the still aspect that potentially could benefit me in low light situations and weddings as like a second body, the intraframe recording is the one feature, the sleeper feature that I'm most excited about, and why I most likely will definitely be picking one up for my unique at-home capture card OBS studio setup. Anyway, let me know in the comments if you're excited about that. Let me know in the comments if there's a feature that didn't get into the camera, or if there's one that I didn't mention that you are actually more excited about than that. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.